Welcome to day 6 of Create Your Flow. So I hope you guys have been finding a lot of things opening up, especially since we're continuing with every exercise that's most restricted through the 7 days. That's what's beautiful about creating your own mobility flow, is that you get to get into your body on a daily basis and exactly what your body individually needs, because it's going to be very different than what someone else needs. And you'll find that opening up your wrist, for example, took away elbow pain. You'll notice that opening up your hips is going to take away low back pain. So we never know where things are really coming from until we start to explore where your actual restrictions are. And this is just a taste, right? We're doing 2 tests every day, but there's so many other tests out there that you can actually open up into. So I'm just giving you a broad taste of what this could be like in your own body. For example, coming down and looking at me sitting like this right now, a lot of people can't do. We do this as we're a kid and we're told to sit crisscross applesauce, and this is normal life as you're a child growing up. But for some reason, we start to lose that ability. Not really for some reason. We sit in chairs, we sit in toilets, we sit on in cars, we sit on couches, we sit on things that are comfortable all day long, right? But we lose the ability to actually come back into this cross-legged position, which is so important, and it's just a function of life. If we can't get this external rotation, you can guarantee you that your squats are going to be more restricted. If you can't get your hip to actually function within it, it's going to be difficult to lunge. It's going to be difficult to pick your kid up off the floor. It's going to be difficult to do a lot of things through life if we can't get back onto the floor where we are starting from. So getting down on the floor, getting back up off the floor is so important. I've actually done a challenge where I've challenged you guys, I don't know if you've seen in the past, to get down on the floor without using your hands and knees, and to get up off the floor, again, without using hands and knees. For some of you, super easy. Others realized, oh my gosh, that's actually really hard. And it is literally a function of life. In cultures where they have to get down on the floor and pray multiple times a day, it's actually been researched and studied that they have less chances of osteoarthritis within their hips because they're getting down and they're getting up off the floor, and they're actually using their full range of motion within their mobility in their hips. So it's so crucial to maintain our hip mobility. It's our access point. It's where we move from. And it doesn't just mean hamstring and hip flexor, because that's only one range of motion, but actually getting the rotation and maintaining the rotation deep inside that joint is most crucial. And I would say this is the majority of where people neglect. And when I see people tap back into this particular exercise that I'm going to show you, it opens up everything. It takes pressure off the knees. It takes pressure off the low back, the 2 most common injuries. So making sure that we understand and we get back in tune with our hip range of motion in terms of rotation is super important. So that's what we're going to dive into today, the hips. So a really easy way to test it is going to be what I call the hip 90-90. So this means it's actually 90-90-90 because there's 3 different positions of 90 degrees of range of motion, which is just a perfect square, right? Perfect corner. So that means my front leg is going to be in a 90-degree position from each other. My legs apart are going to be 90 degrees away from each other. And my back leg is also going to be in a 90-degree angle. So we're not up right here, and we're not doing, any other poses that would require our heel to be closer to our bum. It's going to be actually open into that 90-90 position, because this is going to be a really good tell-all. If you can sit here pretty comfortably and almost sit onto the ground, that means your hip internal rotation in the back leg is actually pretty open and pretty good. If your knee is popping off on the front, like mine is, especially if you go and you turn toward this front knee and you notice that there's still space between your knee and the ground, you probably have some restriction in your hip external range of motion. Not bad, we're just observing, right? If you're like, oh my gosh, I cannot even sit onto my bum in the back leg, and you don't understand how I'm sitting up like this, probably some restriction in your hip internal rotation. Now we want to check both sides, right? Just having a no of one side versus another is not enough. We got to check both. So I'm going to come over to the other side here. Again, making sure that I'm in 90 degrees, 90 degrees, 90 degrees. Now, for me, this side is actually a little bit more restricted. So I just notice side to side. This is what you want to notice. Your body is not going to be perfectly symmetrical. That's not what we're going for. We're going for, let's just understand and gain some awareness of where we have some limitations, okay? So I notice that my internal range of motion for my left hip is actually a little bit tighter because I can't quite sit down comfortably, and it feels just a lot tighter. So a lot of how you're feeling, we're tuning into what that feels like, okay? In the front leg, I notice again, even if I come forward, I actually have less space here, but it's still a little bit restricted. I still have some space. So I know that my hip external rotation is actually a little tight on both sides. My hip internal rotation a little bit tighter on my left side. And I want you guys to observe that, feel that, think back. Do you get hip pain at all? Do you get hip pinching at all? Do you get low back pain? Do you get knee pain? So, and especially, is your knee pain more painful on the side that you have the restriction? So really good to just start to note, to start to open up. We know that hip internal rotation is actually needed when you're squatting, especially when we're trying to go ass to grass, right? Trying to get that bum all the way down to the floor. You actually need more hip internal rotation because it glides to the back when it internally rotates, which is exactly what you do when you bring your knee closer to your chest. So flexion is relevant to hip internal rotation, which is why this guy I see as the most restricted typically and the most forgotten. So getting back into this is so important. Okay, so our exercise is going to be just that. We're going to be right here, and we're going to utilize the breath that we've been practicing over and over and over again. The reason we breathe in through the nose and out through the mouth is because it retrains your diaphragm how to move properly. It actually has to drop and lift, and it creates this pressure system all the way in through our whole core, which our core represents our pelvic floor, which men and women alike have a pelvic floor, and it's really important to be useful. And our diaphragm at the top, our transverse abdominis, which wraps around and below our abs, and our back, our paraspinals, are all really important. So this makes up your whole core area. The thing that first gets at your core isn't doing crunches, it's breathing. So if you want a good strong core, you better be sure that you're breathing correctly. Okay, so the first one that I'm going to do, I'm going to say, okay, my external rotation is a little tight. I want to dive my belly button up and into my knee, sticking my booty out, and I should feel a glute stretch here. So you're gonna go into that breath for at least 2 minutes, or think about just breathing. Maybe it's 30 slow breaths, maybe it's 10. In through the nose, and you can use your hands onto that low rib cage, low belly area. See if you can breathe into it and relax. Okay, at the end of all those breaths, I want you to see if you can actually take this foot and externally rotate off the ground even more. I cannot. I have really restricted hip external rotation, but I'm going to still try. So I'm going to hold for 5 seconds, trying to lift this foot off the floor. 5 seconds, and then I relax back into it. Okay, same concept goes. If your hip internal rotation is a little bit restricted, I'm going to start to sit down toward the ground this way. Okay, so use your hands, use your body. You don't have to force anything. It's just where it's restricted. Great. Now let me sit into that. Not push into it, but sit into it. So I'm going to breathe here for at least 10 to 30 slow breaths again. Okay, getting back into that, trying to sit toward my bottom. I might have to relax and release some of these muscles. Just some gentle rubbing helps. And then at the end, I'm going to try to lift that foot for 5 seconds and then go back into it, okay? So I'm going to quickly go through all my exercises really fast. I have my chin. Do at least 5 to 10 breaths. I'm going to go right into my arm at least 5 to 10 times. I'm going to lie on my back and get those shoulders really open. And then I'm going to go right into my upper back where I know my right rib cage is restricted. Okay, opening that up at least 5 to 10 times. Then I'm going to go right into my standing hip flexor. So reaching up and over at least 5 to 10 times. Okay, then I'm going to come right back down and I'm going to go right into my hips. And I can at least move into this every day, breathing into each one, taking some time for my body, and I already feel more open, even though I was just barely moving into each of those. So I'll see you for the last day tomorrow for that full mobility flow. Whew, that's hard to get through everything.